No more seats left anyway. So if you're sitting in the front, you might have some people coming in wanting to sit on your laps. Anyway, I'm Mike Carnegie. I'm the Commodore of the Gulf Harbour Yacht Club. And it's really my great pleasure to see so many people here tonight, because it means that there's a whole... Oh, I've got to stop the music.
I've heard it. I'm going to turn it off.
I'm going to turn it off. It means that so many of you are passionate about what is happening to our foreshore, and that's why we're here tonight, really, to learn about the foreshore and what we can do about, making it better. Anyway, before we start, I'll just go through some housekeeping things here. The exit doors are there as you came in there. There's another exit door, big exit doors at that end there. And if there's a problem, just follow me, because I'll be the first one out. And the toilets are here. It's a bit difficult. It's like the walk of shame. Anyway, who's ever speaking will stop until you come out again. Just don't take too long. Anyway, that's where they are. So we've got the, and life jackets under each seat, just in case we get a high tide. Lovely, okay. So, why this evening's talk? Well, it really started a long time ago. To give you what they call a backstory these days, my wife Dee and I had a lovely old boat called Tiaraha back in the mid-80s to the late, just before 2000. And she was built in 1909, 96 feet long, a single kauri tree built her. And after a couple of years of carrying cargo around the Hauraki Gulf, we converted the cabins to take 20 passengers, and we used to go away on 3- and 5-day cruises all around the Gulf, up as far north as Whangaroa Harbour and as far south as Tauranga. And what we used to enjoy, really, we came to specialise in the rare and endangered species of the Hauraki Gulf and our coastline, which meant visiting the offshore islands. Now, we had a very good little what they call Stavy craft, 4.25 metre Stavy craft. And one of my joys was playing with this boat with people in it and taking them through the tunnels and the archways and caves, especially at mid-tide or low tide, because then you can see the whole intertidal zone. And in that beautiful intertidal zone, you get all those beautiful weeds, seaweeds, and anemones and all sorts of other beautiful marine life. And we used to see so much of that in the arid island, around the Great Barrier, the Makahinau, and definitely up in Poor Knights and the Cavalli Islands. Absolutely wonderful. And then in our winter months, we used to do the same thing up in British Columbia for many years. We used to charter a boat and take 8 people on 15-day natural history cruises up the coast of British Columbia to southeast Alaska, where you've got those 7-metre intertidal zones, absolutely teeming with life. It's just wonderful. And we spent weeks just doing that over a number of years. It was absolutely wonderful. Now come back to today and to have a look around our inner Gulf islands. Oh dear. The intertidal zone is mostly, especially in this area here, is dead. There's nothing there to get excited about. And so Glenn is our first speaker, Glenn Edney. He's a long-time friend. We've known him for 40 years. And when we met Glenn last year up in Tutakaka, we found he had a 20-foot container in which he was propagating kelp. And I thought, oh, that's wonderful. And then just recently, I had asked him to come down and speak here. And I thought, well, maybe we should be doing the same thing here. So 20-foot container kelp. It's not going to quite work out that way, initially anyway. But anyway, now we've got Glenn here. As I say, we've known Glenn for 40 years, since the mid-80s. Prior to us knowing him, he used to collect fish for Kelly Tarleton's Underwater World. Remember those days when Kelly Tarleton was around? And starting that wonderful aquarium. And since then, he's done everything. I think he was born with fins instead of normal feet. I think he'd love to spend a lot more time in the water than he does, actually. But he's worked on, very briefly, he's worked on our own 2 dive boats that we had. Then he and his wife had a whale watching operation up in the Hauraki Group in Tonga for a number of years, and diving with and photographing whales. And then he went and studied in England and obtained his Masters in Holistic Science, and is currently a PhD candidate at the University of Auckland in this very subject that he's talking about tonight. And but he's been diving and operating dive boats out of Tutukaka since 1986, out of Tutukaka to the Poor Knights, still doing that. He's written a wonderful book on called The Poor Knights Wonderland, and this book here, and I'll just finish up by reading this here because it gives you a pretty good idea of what Glenn is all about. And this is his book here, and he has some here for sale tonight. But no contemporary story of the ocean would be complete without investigating the current threats to the ocean's well-being. In addressing these issues, the author presents a compelling case for recognition of the ocean as a living being with intrinsic value far beyond the benefits she provides humanity, and offers a new vision for our relationship with the living ocean. Glenn. Ready to go.
Great. Well, no pressure then, right? Kia ora koutou. It's a real pleasure to be here, and gosh, what a great turnout. So, yes, known Mike and Dee a long time, and I just want to acknowledge the service they gave me by taking me on. I did all of my commercial sea time with Mike, and got my own skipper's ticket, and that set me on a path that was, you all know, those of you who are skippers in the room, you know what it feels like. You are the master of not only that craft, but in some ways the master of all that you see around you, because you're in relationship in a particular way. This particular way of saying, here I am, I'm taking responsibility for me being here out on the ocean. So yeah, I can see the nods in the audience. So I think I've hit the mark there. The other thing is, though, that when you get underwater, things change a little bit. When you get underwater, whether you're scuba diving or whether you're free diving, whether you're taking in that beautiful breath, diving down, you reach that beautiful point of neutral buoyancy, and then you're just motionless. Well, a very important thing starts to happen to you. You start to dissolve. You're dissolving into the water. The water is becoming alive within you, and the water that makes up our body, that 99% of every single molecule in every single cell of our bodies, starts to come alive and tingle and sensation and excitement about being in the water and being at one with the water. Then something else happens. You realize that there's an intelligence. The intelligence is all around you, and it's not just the very clever fish that know exactly how to make a living in such an extreme environment. It's not just those beautiful sharks that are swimming past you. It's not just the kelp swaying backwards and forwards. It's in the water itself. So the ocean is this beautiful, intelligent being that enables us to exist. This is the kind of relationship that humans have had with the ocean for at least 80,000 years. So when our ancestors moved out of Africa and they started moving along the coastlines of the various islands and peninsulas, down the estuaries, rivers, and into those wide bays, they were fossicking. They were exploring the new experience of becoming a part of this ocean planet. So that's our heritage. And today, we explore that heritage in so many diverse ways. So some of us are out there sailing, motoring. We are out there fishing. We're diving. We're doing science. some of us are artists, some of us are photographers. But whatever way we are engaging with the ocean, the one thing that is happening is that we are in deep relationship. Now I'm going to ask a tricky question. Having just said that, how many of you can remember the last time where you were actually conscious of that deep relationship? Fantastic. Well done. Great. So it's something that's always there with us, and yet it's not always at the surface. And this is really the theme for my talk tonight. It's about that relationship. So just to give you a little bit of a background on that, as Mike just mentioned, I've just completed PhD research. It's now with the examiners, so I have to hurry up and wait. And that research is around community. Well, the title of the research is community co-management. But what I really mean is community relationship with the ocean place and how that informs our activities. So that's going to be the theme for this evening's talk. I'm not very used to the microphones because I really like projecting my voice, but I got told I have to use it tonight. So, okay, right, I'll move away from the screen so that you can all see it. Is that okay for you guys? Yep, okay. Yeah, that's okay. So what is the role of community? The Hauraki Gulf is around about 11,000 years old in its current form. After the last ice age, as the ice melt started happening and this beautiful valley started filling in, and of course all of those mountainous peaks became the islands of the outer Hauraki Gulf. And as the Gulf filled in, of course, those rich alluvial soils from that huge valley created such a rich nutrient soup that this became one of the most diverse and richest areas for marine life. And this was what the Polynesian voyagers, when they arrived here, 1,200 years ago or so, that's what they encountered when they got here. And so we now have the benefits of this beautiful place as well. Schooner Bay, some of you will be familiar with Schooner Bay as an anchorage when it's coming in from the east. Beautiful bay, nice and sand, goes up to about 5 metres from the shore. So it's a good anchorage. I'm going to be talking about Schooner Bay shortly, as well as in one of the case studies I'm going to talk about tonight. But what is the role of community? Well, what I would like to suggest is that community have played almost the sole role in recent times in protecting the Hauraki Gulf, or at least in attempting to protect the Hauraki Gulf. Just think back prior to 2000, prior to the formation of the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park. Who was it who was agitating, who was campaigning, who was striving and demanding that something be done about the decline in the Hauraki Gulf? It was communities all around the Gulf doing that. In 2000, Parliament finally put the Act through and we had the Hauraki Gulf Marine Park. What happened? Bugger all. However, because there was so much community spirit, in 1995, we got the Long Bay Marine Reserve. That happened because of community. There was so much concern about nothing happening once the marine park was put in place that eventually we started the Hauraki Gulf Forum, of course, was formed. And, they were doing really great work and trying to figure out what to do. And eventually we got to the point where they commissioned an international commissioned internationally to have a look at marine spatial plans. And so after the first State of our Gulf report in 2011 and then the next one in 2014, that really was the impetus for us to get the very first marine spatial plan in New Zealand, and still the only marine spatial plan in the country. And then what happened? Bugger all. But community didn't stop. They kept on working away in various places around the Gulf. So the Waiheke Marine Project was formed. And by the way, we mustn't forget, and I apologise profusely for not acknowledging all of the tangata whenua of the Gulf, the various iwi, the 5 iwi, and all of the hapu and the haukainga, the people of particular places that have been working tirelessly on maintaining that harmonious relationship for a very, very long time. So we have a marine spatial plan. We have a lot of communities starting to come together and starting to form ideas around what they can do at their place, all over the place. I was lucky enough to be, as Mike mentioned, working at Kelly Tarleton's, and in the early days we went over to help at Cheltenham Beach. I think it was in 1986 or 1987 when they were doing some of the first surveys of the intertidal zone, Cheltenham Beach. Why? Because there was great concern about the number of people coming with their buckets and basically strip mining the beach. So that was going back all the way into the 1980s. People were already concerned about that. Under my house, I had for a while the original quadrats made of wood that were used at Cheltenham Beach. Yep. Okay, so we move on, and in about 2019, the government at the time said, okay, we've got the marine spatial plan, we've got a lot of people up there saying, hey, we need to do something. So they said, okay, we will respond. And so in 2021, we got the Revitalising the Gulf strategy, the government's response to the marine spatial plan. And what happened? You know the answer, yeah. Okay, but what we can see is that the time between bugger-alls is starting to lessen. All right, we're getting that decreasing time where the urgency of things is starting to be noticed more and more, and so there's less patience for doing bugger-all, and that's where we sit right now. So what I'd like to share with you is some of the things that have happened out of the Marine Spatial Plan and the Revitalising the Gulf strategy. Some of you, if you've read the plan, you'll be aware of this concept called ahumoana. Ahumoana. It was one of the pillars of the spatial plan, and it remained one of the main pillars of the Revitalising the Gulf strategy. Ahumoana is basically the idea that mana whenua and community come together, they work together and support each other, and they take responsibility for looking after their place. Okay, so it's a really great, beautiful vision. The trouble is with lots of really good visions is that somehow you have to actualize them. And so in the Revitalising the Gulf strategy, they came up with the idea of doing a pilot project. They chose 2 places, and only one of them ended up happening, and that was out at Aotea, Great Barrier. And the idea of the pilot project was to do proof of concept, really. How do we make this thing work? And so the idea that we had was to develop that template for ahumoana. And at the core and at the centre of that was, how do we inform ourselves as a community about the state of our place? So community-based monitoring. That was at the centre of the pilot project. The other aspect of that is how do we evolve this unique ahu moana relationship between the peoples of place? So we have the mana whenua of our places who have been there for so many generations, who have their particular unique relationship with place. And then we have the more recent, sometimes 5 or 6 generations of settler families. If you think about Aotea again, we have 6 generations of settler family out there. And so they have a particular relationship with that place. We have people who arrived 3 weeks ago or 3 years ago. They're developing that particular relationship with place. How do we bring that together? And how do we turn that into something that says we understand what we need to do to look after this place? So on the pilot project, we chose 2 sites, initial sites, Catherine Bay, Motairahi, which again, pretty good anchorage up there, beautiful for the sunset, and Schooner Bay was the other site. The starting point for our pilot project was to develop our monitoring program. Now, this is a monitoring program that myself and my fellow trustees of Te Wairua o Te Moana Nui Ocean Spirit have been developing for about 15 years. It came out of my master's research in the Solomon Islands. And it's a qualitative approach to monitoring. We're actually using our intuitive relationship with place to inform specific questions that we want to answer about the health of the particular place. So it's an adaptive framework. So each place is different. The things that are important to a particular community may be unique to that community. And so any kind of monitoring that we do needs to be able to adapt to those unique situations. So basically, what we're looking at is we're using all ways of knowing. We want to develop a specific place-based eco-literacy. So we've become really used to the idea that it's the science that's going to tell us how things are. And there's absolutely no doubt that our modern ecological science is a fantastic tool. But just in this room, we have got untold knowledge of this place. Think about the many generations of people who have been living on the coastlines and the shorelines and going out fishing and going out diving in the Hauraki Gulf over hundreds of years. That intergenerational knowledge, whether it be the mātauranga of hapu, or whether it be that passed down knowledge from generation to generation of fishermen or sailors, this is real knowledge. My pet hate is the word anecdotal. There is nothing anecdotal about our knowledge. The only thing that's anecdotal are the people who criticise local knowledge. Because, for an example, when we are going into a bay such as Schooner Bay, I'm diving with people who have been there for 40 years, but I'm also diving with people whose parents were diving there 50 or 60 years ago. They fish there every day. They see the sunrises and the sunsets. They see the tides coming in and out. They see exactly when the Brooder's whales come into the bay, what time of the year, what time of day, what the wind conditions are, because that depends on where the shrimp get pushed in. All of those sorts of things. Now, that's really important knowledge. Knowledge that we as scientists, we will never have that knowledge. We're there, we drop in, we do our surveys, we fly back out again. No, not literally, obviously. Well, actually, if we're going out to Aotea, of course, it's just about the only way to get there now. Okay, now, I had to put this photo in because I'm here at Gulf Harbour. It's a pretty flash place. I have to say, I'm feeling slightly overdressed looking at you guys tonight. But this is Aotea. and these are the monitoring teams. And, looks can be deceiving. We've got a PhD marine scientist in there. We've got 2 really highly qualified engineers in there. We've got some pretty clever people there, and we've got some hobos as well. I'm not sure if you can guess which one's the hobo. But that hobo happens to have been diving in that bay for 40 years, and he's an avid diver, and so his knowledge of that place was absolutely remarkable. We do get to have fun, and this is something that's really, really important, because our relationship with our place needs to be fun. And so if we're going to be working hard to try and learn about how we should behave within this relationship, we need to be having fun. So doing underwater surveys, of course, is great fun if you're into free diving or scuba diving. But what do we get out of it? So in this kind of surveying, even though we are using a qualitative process, we still end up with some hard data. And so we end up with a health index. We were able to look at just thinking about the health of a place. Think about the health of a person. You know when you're at peak. You know when you're at 100%. We know looking at each other as well. You get to know somebody quite well. You know when they're at 100%. You know when they're almost okay, but they're not quite there. You know when they've got to that point where they're starting to lose their resilience to things, right? That is the green zone. That's that resilient zone where if something happens, what we would call a perturbation, big word, doing something that's not so flash happens, we know that the ecosystem, we know that ourselves are able to respond to that. We're able to take it in, we're able to deal with it, and we can still carry on. Once we get out of that green zone and we get into that yellow caution zone, we are starting to lose that resilience. Now, a resilience in ecosystems comes down to 2 key things: abundance and diversity. If we have an abundance of life and we have a diversity of life, we have resilience. When we get into that yellow zone, that's when we're starting to lose that resilience. And as we go down that yellow zone and we start heading towards the red zone, we're getting to the point where we're not only losing resilience, but we are completely losing the ability to recover. When we get right down into that red zone, we're in deep trouble. So we can use this health index to help us understand what we can do, what behaviours of ours we can change, how we may be able to work with the ecosystem to help that ecosystem get back up to that resilient green zone. So it's pretty cool. The other really good thing about this is we do it together. In this type of monitoring, surveying, we're always doing it as a group. Now, obviously, when we're in the water, we need our buddy. We've got to follow our decent safety procedures. But it's really, really important that we actually come together and come to an agreement about what we're experiencing. So we're doing our surveys. We're just experiencing the place by ourselves with our buddy, but we're not talking to them. When we get back on shore, though, that's when we want to share our experiences. And this has always been this way. It's what we do in science as well. You know, we might be running a transect or using a quadrat and we're counting things. But when we finish counting, we still got to understand what that means. You know, what does 10 mean? What does 50 mean? Right? We need to understand that. And it's always best if we can sit around and talk about that together. Come up with a consensus. Oh, look, some people recognize it. Great. Okay, I wanted to share this with you because obviously we've been doing this out on Aotea, and Aotea was the first place where the exotic colupa species turned up. The pilot project was the first to observe colupa in Schooner Bay. NIWA had been there, they didn't find it. We were there only 3 months later, and there it was. But it wasn't just there. It was covering large areas, particularly the soft sand substrates. Then amongst the reef areas, and the cobble reefs at the sandy areas, it was all over the place, as you can see in that picture there. Now you can see one of our dive team there, free diving. He's down there at about 8 meters of water, and at that particular time, this was over a year ago, we took that photograph. There was so much down there that was just these huge floating mats. Pretty grim. But we were also observing, because we're there every season, 4 times a year we're doing our surveys, summer, autumn, winter, spring. We were also observing how the ecosystem was coping with having the caulerpa there. So a lot of what you're hearing about caulerpa is just all about how bad it is, about it's going to smother everything and kill everything. And that was my concern as well when it first arrived. But being an ecologist, I want to go, okay, that's my perception of things, but what's actually happening? And so we spent a lot of time observing. So some of the things that we observed were that where there used to be beautiful seagrass beds, but there aren't anymore because we dredged them for scallops and we silted them because too much runoff from the land. There's no more seagrass beds, but the caulerpa was there. What do we see there? We see juvenile snapper, juvenile trevally. We see a lot of invertebrate life using this new ecosystem, making use of it. That wasn't something that we expected to see, and to be perfectly honest, it was a little bit hard to stomach because we were still, all of us, thinking, no, this is just really, really bad. There's not going to be anything positive here, only bad. But as a good scientist, you have to be open-minded, and this is what we were observing. The other thing that we observed was kina eating the caulerpa, and this was pretty exciting. And this was on kina barrens, and we all know why kina barrens have developed. You probably don't know the full story, but I'm not sure I've got time for that tonight. My wife is shaking her head saying, no, I definitely haven't. So the caulerpa was growing over the kina barrens, and what we were seeing was little crop circles with a kina in the middle. So we observed this a few times. I got in touch with John Walsh from Biosecurity New Zealand, and I said, John, is it okay if I open a couple of kina and have a look inside and make sure that they are actually eating the caulerpa? And he said, okay. So we did, and indeed they were eating the caulerpa. Now we had some pretty keen guys there that are really into eating kina. I said, go for your life, man. I don't really like them myself. And they ate them. They're still with us. So that was our first toxicity test. But we thought, okay, maybe kina can be an ally with the caulerpa. So we devised an idea where we would build some cages, and we would put the cages over the sand where there was really dense caulerpa and see what happened. We thought, well, we want to do a control as well because we know that kina don't really like being on the sand. So we put one of our cages over some rocky area, and we collected boulders, again with all permission from Biosecurity New Zealand, and we put these boulders all really densely covered in caulerpa inside that cage, and then we put the kina in there, and then we observed. So a little video just to give you a bit of a taste. So I'm pretty sure that we can safely say kina don't like sand very much. So one of the things that kina do when they are feeling a little bit stressed, and you'll notice this if you have a healthy population of crayfish, you'll notice that the kina will spend more time in the cracks and crevices, basically trying to hide from the crayfish. So this is cage B, where we have the rocks. You can see there's only one kinner up on the side. All of the rest of the kinner are happily actually out in the daytime feeding away on the caulerpa. And so the next one was a bit of a shock when I went down and saw the 5 dead kinner. And we're not quite sure what killed them, but 2 possibilities: just the sheer stress, and the other possibility that maybe Feki, octopus, might have been able to get into the cage. One thing we did notice, though, that over the 3.5 months of our trial, the amount of caulerpa that was eaten on the rock substrate, they took care of about half of it. Oh yeah, that was my dive supervisor here. A couple of months after doing that one, we were doing another survey, and we actually had a great white come into the bay. Yeah, we responded slightly differently. Okay, so just to finish off on the caulerpa, one of the beauties of monitoring on a regular basis is that we can start to make comparisons of things. And so we've been able to compare our observations of the caulerpa from 2022 all the way up to July this year. And you can see on the chart how things have started to change. So quite a little bit before NIWA put out their report about the huge amount of receding of the caulerpa. We're not allowed to call it a dieback at the moment, but it's receding a lot. But before that happened, we were already noticing it. Just a month or so after we removed our kinner cages in about February 2024, we go back to do our autumn one, so it was maybe a couple of months, and where the kinner cages were, absolutely no caulerpa whatsoever. It had completely disappeared from that sand area. Well, that's pretty interesting. That's reflected in that survey. We can start to see that those figures are starting to come up a little bit into the yellow zone. So we thought, okay, we keep on observing this. And the other thing we started observing is more on the reef, more caulerpa coming up onto the reef. We had big dieback of our clonia because of the marine heat wave. And so the caulerpa was growing up on those reef areas because there was now sunlight coming down onto the reef. By the time we got to this year, you can see that the caulerpa is up in the green zone. At one of the dive sites, that's the photograph on the bottom, that's where the kinner cages were. There is 0 caulerpa in that area. So we've had more than a 90% dieback in that area. And on the other side of the bay, that's the original photo that I put up. That's that same area. There's now no caulerpa there. There are still patches. We noticed that demoiselles were using the caulerpa as their nest sites because the caulerpa, this is when it was really thick, the caulerpa was covering the coralline turf that they usually like to be in. So all of these things we observed as a community monitoring team. We've been sharing all of this information with Biosecurity New Zealand, with NIWA, with the ACRT, the Aotea Caulerpa Response Team, and all of this information has been really invaluable to them in making their decisions about what they want to do going forwards. So the value of community and community monitoring, it just can't be overestimated. The other thing that we've done, just finishing off, is we've been looking at the coda, at the crayfish. As you know, the inner Gulf is fully closed. A lot of concern out there on Aotea about what that means for them, particularly coming into the summer. So we've been able to look at, thanks to the caulerpa, we've had a marine reserve on the west coast of Aotea for 4 years, nearly 4 years, if you include COVID. And so we saw recovery, and then it opened up for diving, and we saw them decline. And now that it's sort of open to diving, we're starting to see that it's going back to what it was like when we first started doing our monitoring. And the concern is that's only going to get worse. So we've just completed a survey out there. This is a survey to get people's feedback, and you can see what is being looked at for local bylaws for Aotea. So watch the space. When you're going out to Aotea this summer, there's probably going to be an app that you need to look at. It's going to tell you where is safe to anchor, and it's going to tell you how many crayfish you can take each day. It's going to tell you whether or not you can accumulate daily bag limits. It's going to tell you where you can't take them. Yeah? And that, again, is because community are taking charge.
Is this going to apply to the whole community, though? That's what I'd like to know. It's all right to pick on the boaties going out there, but is it going to apply to the community? They can't just take what they want.
No, this is for everybody.
Okay, that's the important point.
Yep.
The other thing is, do you think the caliper is dying back like fanworm has done? Do you see a relationship between the two?
No relationship between the two.
Well, they're not the same, but obviously fanworm has died way back, and caliper is starting to do that now.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting question. I probably haven't got time to go into too much of it right now, but one of the things that I think we need to understand is just like we see on the land, the gorse comes in, it's a pioneer plant, the bush grows up and the gorse fades away. You know, perhaps that's what we're seeing in the ocean as well. Yeah, but time will tell. We'll be out there monitoring. Okay, the next one which is related to this is Hauraki Point. They have got the Hauraki Point Marine Initiative for fairly similar reasons to what's going on here. They're really concerned about particularly the loss of their mussel beds. It's a small community out there, right? That's it. That's Hauraki Point community. About 400 people live there. But over the summertime, they get a big influx of people coming out from, particularly from South Auckland, because it's a fairly close place for them. And so that's what their rock pools look like. A lot of sedimentation, not much going on, a lot of oysters. Funny you should mention Mediterranean fanworm. There's a fair bit down there. And so one of the things we looked at, we did that sort of qualitative kind of rapid assessment, and then we thought, well, you know, what would be really good to do down there is to do some quadrats. We need to actually keep an eye on particular areas of mussel beds. And so one of the members there built his homemade 1 metre square quadrat. I'm not quite sure why he put the lines in there, but anyway, and he put a marker on the rock so he can take that quadrat back every month to exactly the same place and photograph it. This is community. One of the members is the school teacher at the intermediate school in Papukura, and so the school kids are helping with the analysis. That's community. Unfortunately, this is what the graph looks like. So before Christmas, up to getting close to 250 mussels per square metre. By the time we get into March, April and May, we've lost just about all of them in one of the quadrats, and they're down to sort of around 50 per square metre. So what they've done, and I think this is something that is really worth thinking about, their process was, first of all, they identified the problem. They talked about it. They said, what do we want to see? What would we like to see in the future? And what they wanted to see was the ability to go down and get a feed of mussels occasionally, not to feed the family every week. They realise they can't do that, but just to have the ability to go and have that pleasure of collecting a few mussels and having a nice feed, because you went down there and you collected them yourself. You didn't go to the supermarket, right? So that's what they're aiming for. So the next step was for them to engage with their local community. The next step was for them to engage with the iwi and hapu of that area. So for them, that was Ngāti Pawa, and then the hapu on the coastline. So the two marae on that coastline. And so through that engagement, through building those relationships, they've come to where they're at right now, which is that a rāhui will be placed on the whole area. And then following the rāhui, they will be putting in a 186A closure application. Now, they'll be closing the coastline to the taking of all shellfish. Because one of the things that I noticed when I went out there was that there were hardly any limpets. Man, there should have been so many more cat's eyes than there were. So there were hardly any starfish, there were no crabs. The same thing, you guys are familiar with this. And so what we talked about was, if you're going to do a closure, not just for mussels, you need to do a closure because the mussels also need to have everybody else there. They live in community just like we do, and they need that variety just like we do. Yeah. So that's a work in progress. And lastly, I'm just going to share with you very quickly something that we're doing just a little bit further north from the Gulf, up in Tutukaka. You'll be familiar with that anchorage. Please don't go too far into Pacific Bay. I don't want any anchors dragging onto my boat on its mooring. The island, which is Motu Te Maika, or otherwise known as Phillip Island, that's where we've got our kelp regeneration project. So we have a charitable trust there, but we also work with the local hapu, and a couple of us are part of a management group which is set up by the hapu to look at what can be done to regenerate the area. So what has been done so far is that we have a 186 closure. So that was put in place. It's coming up for renewal in February next year. And that is a closure to the taking of all shellfish and a netting ban in the harbours and estuaries. So this again is community and hapu working together, building that relationship. As part of that, we also thought, hey, we've got a real problem with kina barons on our coast, and we thought it would be a really good idea to actually survey the whole coastline, 17 kilometres of coastline from the low tide line down to 10 metres. MPI gave us a little bit of dosh so that we could cover the costs of doing that, and two of us, Julian and myself, over 2.5 days covered that 17 kilometres free diving. We were pretty buggered by the end of it, but what we were able to do is look at all of those areas along the coastline. You can see our coding in there. The upshot was that basically in the good areas it's about 30 to 40% kinnibaron. In the bad areas it's 90 to 95% kinnibaron in the shallow areas. That means there's no kelp forests. Kelp growing deeper down. The kina don't like to go down there much. Actually, I don't know. Sorry?
How hard is it to get a 186A?
Yes?
How hard is it to get a 186A, and how strong is it?
Okay, so the 186A is basically the legal process for supporting a rāhui. So that's how it was initially was set up. A 186A can be applied for by anybody. The ability to successfully get a 186A is much enhanced if you're working together. So it can take as little as 3 months. It can take as much as a year to get one in place.
And how enforceable is a rāhui?
A rāhui depends on your belief systems and your respect for mana whenua, but it doesn't have any LAW standing. Okay, right? But 186A does. Okay, yep. And that's why a lot of all groups are choosing to go down the 186A route. It only lasts for 2 years and you have to reapply for it. So it is a bit of a drag. But it gives you a pause. It gives you a chance to think about what next. And it certainly gives places like intertidal areas, it gives them a rest. So it's well worth having a think about. We have a big problem with our kinner barrens. So what we decided to do was we decided to give the kelp forest a helping hand. You can do kinner removals. We need to approach that quite carefully. Again, I don't have time to go into that, but it's one of the things that we need to do, but it's not the only thing. Kelp forests they're the home for everybody, but they need everybody to be a good kelp forest. So when I say everybody, I'm talking about all the invertebrates, all of the fish species. Kinner are a really important part of kelp forests. They make sure that there's clearings. That helps create the diversity in a kelp forest. So we need the kinner there. We just need them to be in balance. We need all of the fish species, not just the crayfish and the snapper. They're good at eating the adults. But we need the fish that are going to fossick in. We need all of the wrasses and all of the milky to fossick in amongst the coralline turf and get those little babies that are hiding in there. We need the planktivores up there when the kinner spawn to eat enough of the eggs so that only a decent number arrive down on the reef, not all of them. Just a very short video to show you what Phillip Island looked like in 2021. Quite a lot of sedimentation. So we've got a wetland project that we are working on in the harbour in Church Bay, which is where this is. And also we have a lot of planting, a lot of riparian planting and planting that people are just doing without thinking about the harbour. But we have a big population of people living there and everybody likes to plant trees. If you have a look at aerial photos from the 1930s and 40s of Tutakaki, you can hardly see a tree. You have a look at photos now and the whole foreshore of the harbour is now forested. Remnant kelp and lots of kinner. So that's what it looked like. We decided that to give it a helping hand, we would actually start propagating kelp. We'd heard about this process called green gravel. We got hold of some ex-interns of ours from our trust, Bo and Ella, who were studying at Massey University with Professor Dave. And they said, yeah, we're doing green gravel. We can come and help you. They just loved it. And Ella was doing her master's. And she said, yeah, that could be part of my research as well. We'd love to have a community program going. So we thought, well, that's cool. How hard can it be? Because all we have to do is focus on the middle bit. The middle bit is when the zoospore are released into the water. They turn into male and female gametophytes. They do their thing and turn into the embryonic sporophytes. They land on the pebbles. Sweet as. Easy. Okay, well, 3 years later, we think we've finally got it cracked. So that's this is the reproductive tissue, the sorus tissue. And once we've prepared the sorus tissue, we have to excite it. Who said marine biology was boring, eh? Okay, and then we put it into the tanks. We've got to feed it. We've got to give it nutrients. We've got to give it sunlight. We've got to make sure the water is nice and clean. And then we need to give it time. And then we get these little baby eclonia. Aren't they just gorgeous? So, like, you know, we're kind of a bit weird now about our eclonia. And once it's at that stage, they're ready to plant out onto the reef. But before we do that, we take the opportunity, the educational opportunity that this gives us. And so whilst we're going through each process, which can take around about 2.5 to 3 months to get them from the sorus tissue to ready to plant out on the reef, we get school groups and we get adult groups as well, but we use that opportunity to not only teach people about the kelp, but also the ecology of the reef, and we get people out and onto the regeneration site and so on. So it's a lot of fun. And by the way, Mike, you need a 40-foot container, mate. Okay, so we're ready to plant out. We're going to get rid of the kinner. I'm not going to show you the video because it's a bit embarrassing, especially for Janie because she eats kinner for the first time. So importantly, kinner are really important. They're a taonga species. They have a role to play. We've got to treat them with respect. They're not the enemy. Okay, we are just helping to have balance. So this is what they look like. Look at that. That's 2 weeks after being planted. That's another couple of weeks. Look how much they've grown. Like, we can't do that in the lab. We can't get them growing that fast. You know, we ain't the ocean. And then we have cyclones. So out of the 200 that we planted, those were the survivors. What do? Pick yourself up, go again. So 2 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months. One of those survivors from Cyclone Gabrielle, I've now collected 2 lots of sorus tissue from one of those survivors. So that one that one of the 4 or 5 that survived has actually reproduced new babies. So we go from kinner barren to kelp planting to kelp forest. So this is what community can do. So what are you guys going to do? First thing I'd like to say, get to know your place. I know that you've all got this really great relationship with this place. Maybe you want to get down on your hands and knees and really get to know the place. Get to know who's there, who should be there. Get this book. It's a new book, come out in 2022, the New Zealand Seashore Guide. It's fantastic. Where they got all of the photographs of all of this amazing stuff, it wasn't from here, but this is what should be here. Great. So we live in a community. We live next to another community. All we have to do is figure out how we become part of that community. So remember that every single tide is going to bring new opportunities in. The ocean is so resilient, every single tide. Hey, thank you very much. I know I've gone over time. Sorry, Mike.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dan. Stand by one. Okay, well, all I can say is wow, you know. I've learned so much this evening after having been on top of the water for so many years and been diving. I mean, the best dive I ever had was off Little Barrier, sitting on the bottom at 45 feet and just watching the world go past. It's just absolutely wonderful. But it's become very obvious that we don't just get a 20-foot container sitting out here and growing some kelp. That's not going to solve the problem. There's a lot more work to be done before we get into that. And so we're going to have to form a plan as to how we're going to get this done. And luckily we've got Wayne Walker from the council here this evening who's behind the plan, which is wonderful. And we're going to need a lot, and John Watson there, and we're going to need a lot of help from folks like you. We won't be taking names tonight because it's a long way to go before we get that. But what I didn't tell you at the start, we have another speaker this evening, just very briefly, Mark Lenton, who is of Protect Whangaparo Rock Pools. And this is one of the another reason why we're here. You know, I read the publicity in the Hibiscus Coast Matters about Mark's concern about what's happening to our local foreshore and forest and bird. James Mackenzie is here as well. There is a lot of concern as to what's happening, and now we're trying to find out exactly what we're going to do about it. And Mark's just going to go run through his presentation and just bring us up to date with what's actually happening here on our foreshore. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Look, I'd better start with an apology. I may have inadvertently mentioned a 7 p.m. start, but the bar has made us bigger biggest profit in 15 years.
Clicker. Clicker. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mark Lenton, born and bred in Pakaringa. It wasn't a joke. And a long-term resident of Army Bay. Firstly, thanks to Mike and Dee for hosting the evening. Yeah, great place. I haven't been here as much as I should have been, but I will certainly try and get down here every 6 months. And Glenn, there's people like you that make a difference, mate. So just keep doing what you're doing. Thank you. I think, like many of you people, my love of the ocean started by looking into a rock pool. And as a young kid, some of us then grew up to become marine scientists. Others became conservationists. But I think most of us grew up to appreciate the foreshore. And we certainly respected our intertidal rock pools. We understood the importance it played on the broader marine ecosystem. Remember that? That's what Army Bay used to look like. At the height of last summer, I think it was probably January or February, I went down to Army Bay. It was a hot Saturday. And I'd seen a few people in the past with buckets and tools. But this was a particularly bad day. I went down to the eastern end, which is the end towards Turi. And I observed a group of 15 people with buckets. And it looked like there were 3 generations of family. Grandma, grandpa, mum and dad, and about 10 kids. And if you've ever been picking blackberries, so mum and dad and grandpa and grandma are on their hands and knees in the rock pools. They had chisels to remove the limpets and the chitin. They were using piano wire to scrape the anemone and the seaweed off the rocks. They had tongs. They had fishing nets to remove the fish. They were throwing the creatures onto the rocks. The kids were scampering around and filling the buckets. Really good education for the kids. I asked mum and dad what they were doing, and they looked at me blankly and carried on. I looked around the rock pools that day and I counted over 100 people with buckets and tools and chisels and piano wire. I looked to the western end along the beach. There were more people on the rocks that day than there were people walking on the beach and swimming in the ocean. And it had been like that the day before and the day before. I went home and I contacted Fisheries New Zealand. They thanked me for my call. And they said, unfortunately, we won't be able to get there today, but please call next time. It was then I realised that we had a problem, and I realised that there was no one stopping it from happening. This was an all too familiar sight last summer. But we're not alone. In 2018, the Local Matters printed this article about Stanmore Bay. Residents were angered because people were turning up at 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning with headlamps around their foreheads, stripping the rock pools clean. An MPI spokesman at the time responded by saying, "Yep, it's a bit strange for them to be out at that time of night, but they may have a good reason." They had a bloody good reason. Mary Coop. Now, she is a warrior. She's an Omaha resident. Back in 2022, Omaha was getting smashed. every single day, particularly over the summer, day and night. She ran a really well-supported petition. It made it all the way to Parliament. She had over 3,500 signatories. She had the backing of local kaitiaki, Chris Pink, who was MP at the time. Unfortunately, it got to reading in Parliament, and David Parker, who was Minister of Fisheries at the time, rejected the application on the basis of customary right, without really saying whose customs were being protected. Neither Māori nor Pākehā eat starfish. It was then that it started getting a bit of global attention. The Guardian in the UK ran a story about Omaha. Mary herself was interviewed live on BBC World News, and that has quite a reach. Just bear in mind that that Stanmore Bay incident was 7 years ago. This article appeared in the Herald, January this year. Muriwai is still getting smashed. A concerned Whangaproa local submitted this to the Hibiscus Matters. In a little over 6 months, from the start of summer, November, through to May, Army Bay was stripped clean. The only thing in the rock pools now is seawater. The bucket people, the gatherers, the bucket people are taking advantage of some really loose, outdated rules. Yes, we have rules for the more commonly consumed shellfish, but this bugger here is the problem. This entitles a gatherer to take 50 per person per day of all others. Now, all others is your starfish, it's your limpets, it's your chiton, it's your small fish swim around, it's your sea anemone, and it's your seaweed. It's those little black nerites, it's your hermit crabs, it's your very small crabs. Let's just take starfish for an example. One person can take 50 starfish a day. 10 people can take 500. A group of 100 gatherers in a weekend can take 5,000 bloody starfish. That is what is happening, and that's why our rock pools are empty. Chances are, if you see a starfish on the beach, it came in with the last tide. But things are changing, as Glenn pointed out. Through our voices and through our actions, people are listening. We are sending a really clear message. We do not do this in New Zealand. It is not the Kiwi way. We are actively confronting the problem. Now, until a ban is in place, and a ban is coming, we're offering education to the gatherers. And where possible, we are returning buckets of sea life back into the ocean. Our presence on Whangaproa's coastline at low tide is making a positive difference. And thank you to those of you who are getting out at low tide and making yourself noticed. Local media has provided really good exposure. The Local Matters in particular have published a number of articles. They are really strongly behind this cause. Various Facebook pages across the coast are covering this. The New Zealand Herald has run a number of articles over recent months highlighting the plight of Whangaproa. News Talk ZB's Roman Travers, I don't know if you listen to the radio between midnight and 6 a.m. I generally don't, but I listen to the recording the next morning. He covered it in detail, and he had a number of people ringing in saying, "Hi, I'm from Timaru, we're buggered. Hi, I'm from the Hawke's Bay, we're stripped clean. Hi, I'm from Northland. Hi, I'm from Piha, the same old story. People were ringing in from South Auckland, my old haunt, Pakuranga and Howick, and saying, well, we're actually stripped out 20 years ago. You guys are lucky. TV1 News is actively following this story, and they will be jumping on board once a ban is in place. The Hauraki Gulf Forum, and look, I need to thank Wayne Walker, John Watson. You guys have helped me navigate a myriad of bureaucracy and smoke and mirrors. You got me to speak at the forum, and that was bloody good. You also held the forum to account. You made damn sure that they took this seriously and that they made sure that action was being taken. So thank you, guys. Really. The Hauraki Gulf Forum is an interesting panel, and I think, Wayne, you said it was. There's a cross-section of local and regional councillors, Ministry of Primary Industries, Fisheries New Zealand, DOC are in there, and the co-chair is none other than Nicola McDonald, who is the CEO of the Ngāti Manahiri Settlement Trust. They carry some influence. Fisheries New Zealand were ordered to go away and come back and report on their findings of the state of the Gulf. And as we suspected, they came back and admitted significant depletion on our foreshores. They admitted they'd dropped the ball. They admitted that they were under-resourced and that they were understaffed. They made it a priority to fix. Auckland Council have also made it a priority to fix. Shane Jones, not everyone's favourite. I quite like the guy, and to give him some credit, he does respond to my correspondence. He has assured me that whangaproa will be covered under the Revitalising the Gulf Hauraki Plan, that thing. I mentioned to Shane last week, I said, mate, take this opportunity while there is some momentum, okay? Please apply a ban to whangaproa, but take this opportunity. Nowhere in 2025 should a law enable anyone to pillage and strip rock pools bare on any New Zealand coastline. Why? Why should anyone take piano wire, tongs and bloody chisels to the beach? Take your buckets, but make sandcastles out of them. Finally, most importantly, Ngāti Manahiri. It took me a while to get to them, but thanks to you gentlemen, we got there in the end. Ngāti Manahiri have acknowledged the problem. They hold a massive jurisdiction from Mangawhai in the north down to Takapuna. They are in the process of applying for a Section 186A ban for the entire length of the 100 kilometres of coastline. Yay. If it's passed, it will be the largest ban in New Zealand history. But until it is passed, and Glenn, I know you've somewhat dimmed my enthusiasm, but hey, it's been taken seriously, and I think this acknowledges Manahiri's own concerns around the plight of our coastline. A number of people have asked, what can we do to help? This sign was illegally posted down at Army Bay recently. It lasted 24 hours before it was removed by local authorities. But within that 24-hour time frame, at least half a dozen groups of bucket people turned around and went home. So this is the power of signage. How can we help? First of all, people, join the whangaproa, the Protect Whangaproa Rock Pools Facebook page. That's the happening place. The cool people go there. It's where you can see what's going on. There are regular updates on the Manahiri application. And it's also an opportunity for people to share stories about what they're seeing around not only whangaproa, but around New Zealand's coastline. Voice your opinion. Let people know that you're pissed off. Speak to Ngāti Manahiri. Contact Fisheries New Zealand and Ministry of Primary Industries. Tell them that it's not good enough. Contact your friendly councillors. Reach out through Facebook. The power of social media, my God, it's powerful. Local media. I was going to say Rodney Times, but probably no more. The Hibiscus Matters, Local Matters, Maharangi Matters, really powerful network. Radio. People want stories. Contact people like Kerry Woodham. She'll run a story for you, no problem at all. If you are at the beach and you see people with buckets and tongs and piano wire, politely and respectfully offer some education. Explain the long-term impacts of what's been done. Explain by looking at what's around them that this is not how it used to be. What you see in there is an empty rock pool. It used to be full of life. If you can, offer to return the buckets of sea life to the ocean. It is actually a really good feeling when you throw that bucket back into the sea. Report poaching to fisheries. We've got to, okay? We've got to. Even if you feel it's ineffective at the moment, do it. It helps fisheries build a profile of where, when, and how. Support Ngāti Manahiri. So through the Protect Whangaparo Rock Pools page, there is a link which has come from Ngāti Manahiri. They are conducting surveys in the local area. They're asking people to register their interest on the page. Now, registering your interest means that you may have to do some weekend work. MM squared, I think it's called, MM squared. So you drop down the plank of wood and you count what's in there and you report it back. You do that again every 2 years. You measure the change. They have had a ton of registrations. They have been inundated with people offering to assist. That shows how much not only you people in this room, but the people out there give a damn. People really do care. To support the application, Manahiri are going to be asking people to submit their own personal letters. Now, this is a chance to become emotional. It's a chance to provide fact. It's a chance to show how we individually care about this, what it means to us, what it means to our families, and what we know it will mean to future generations if it disappears. So when the offer is made, please take the opportunity. 1,000 individual letters, I think, is much, much better than one letter assigned by 1,000 people. Support fisheries. Look, these guys do a bloody good job, okay? There are 21 full-time fisheries officers across the whole of Auckland. Now, 21 minus 6 that are on annual leave, another 3 have got COVID, the other half are taking sickies. You're probably down to no more than 6 people actively patrolling the whole of Auckland. And chances are they're dragging illegal drift nets out of the Manukau, okay? They will need our support when there's a ban. There's no additional government funding, okay? They're going to have 21 people. They're going to have a handful of honorary fisheries officers. Anybody with a bit of spare time, even wanting to do some weekend work, become an HFO. Doesn't suit everybody, but it is rewarding. You all right there, mate? Yep. Just time them, would you? And look, finally, when the ban does come in, at the moment, we can't do a hell of a lot. We can educate and we can offer to return buckets. When there's a ban, when there's a rāhui, which I hope we will respect, when there's a section 186A that has a minimum of 2 years, we will have some authority to say, mate, bugger off. You're not doing that here. You're not doing that anywhere. We can act with authority. And look, I know collectively it will make a hell of a difference. Anyone? This is Army Bay. Like all of our coastline, this is more than a beach. It's a living ecosystem, and to many people, it's a spiritual place. It's fragile, it needs our help, and it needs our protection. And I reckon it's worth fighting for. Now I can see a few people nodding off. Thanks for your time, folks. Cheers.
Mark. That's splendid. Thank you so much. Again, learning so much this evening. Holy moly. And it's obvious the answer is community's got to do it. You can't rely upon anyone else. And I would encourage you to keep in touch with the Facebook Protect Whangaparo Rock Pools, and we'll work through there for the time being anyway. And just now, I mean, I started off with the idea of a 20-foot container, calling it the Marine Sciences Resource Centre, but it's going to be a little bit more than a 20-foot container. There's a lot more work we've got to do before then, and that's, you know, the science of finding out what's actually there right now and getting the data for it. So, so please keep in touch with that Facebook page, please, and that will keep you in touch with what we're trying to do. And we might be calling for help, and obviously we've got a lot of thinking to do as how we're going to do all of this, because there's a lot of organisation to be done before we say, hey, take this metre square and go down to the beach and see what's in that metre square this week, please. So please keep in touch with us over that. There's a couple of things I have to say before I'm going to let you go, if you don't mind. First, I must point out this. We saw this in the library last week. If you can't see what it is, it's actually a whale made up of all the rubbish that's picked up out of the rock pools, funny enough. And it's from a lady who's in the old care home at North Haven. And a whole bunch of them did this, which I think is absolutely wonderful. And we told her that we'd display it tonight and let her know that it was from North Haven. So, so just have a quick look at that. But that's from the rubbish picked up on the beach.